Good afternoon, everybody. We'll call this meeting of the Woodford County Fiscal Court's Budget and Finance Committee to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Squire Taylor.
Here.
Squire Varner.
Here.
Squire Carl.
Here.
And Judge Kay.
Yes, ma'am. All right, we are duly constituted as the Budget and Finance Committee to take up a pretty substantial agenda. Once the representative from All Points Broadband, Philip Brown, gets here, we'll let him have the floor because I know he's got some travel. But I'd like to start out with the Parks and Recreation funding model. And that's been disseminated to everybody for your review. And I would like to make one big note that's changed since the City of Versailles passed their resolution or municipal order. I think they did one or the other. But the 3% interest from the city on advance funds has now been removed from the overall funding proposal. And that's a pretty simple reason. Their checking account gets better interest rate than that. And if they were to lend us that money at 3%, they'd actually lose money. And we wouldn't ask the city to do that. They didn't anticipate that when they made that offer. And so as far as the county is concerned, I think that first we will look at paying for things in cash. And then I believe at some point in time we will get with the city to look at a potential bonding when interest rates go down. But we're looking at several years of projects. So once we move forward with this funding proposal, Rich Pichter is with us, our Director of Parks and Recreation. And Rich, can you kind of come to the podium and talk about real quick, if we adopt this, what your next moves will be from the Parks and Recreation standpoint?
Our next move will be to continue forward with Big Spring Park and the pickleball projects that we've said all along are the farthest along in the process. Our architect is currently working on the final or the construction documents. So once those are approved by the Parks and Recreation Board and ready to go out, those will go out for bid, and we'll have a solid price and start times and that for Big Spring project, which is anticipated to take a year or thereabouts, 9 months, 10 months. And at the same time, this spring we would start with the design of the pickleball courts and hope to start construction as soon as that went out for bid, which could happen, as early as this spring as well. Build time for that is much shorter. We're probably looking more like a month from when we got a contractor and got someone on board. So those are to be the two projects that you would see between now and next year, say April or May time period. And then from there, as we've said, there's grants we're working on, regional trail grant for the Huntertown. We would be looking in year 3 on the basketball courts for the land and water grant. We currently have a land and water grant in use with Huntertown, so we couldn't apply for another one until that one is done. The paperwork on that is coming through. We awarded the money over a year ago, but the way that things work, the federal government is slow. We should have that project completed this spring, early summer, which would mean next year at this point we could apply for land and water for the basketball and bathrooms potentially at the county park around the basketball courts. But that would be another additional $250,000 that we would have.
Thank you, Director Pichter. And the pickleball project in particular, which has been taken up by this court under the leadership of Squire Blackford, is moved to the point where it can be in line first because of the work of the fiscal court. And so I appreciate that, Squire Blackford. I'd like for folks to look at the Woodford County High School Park Survey responses. Mayor Trogett had a really good idea to consult with folks in the schools to ask our youth about what they wanted to see. And just piggybacking on that, as we can imagine, in the first response about the facilities at Parks and Rec. Everybody, including our youth, believes that Falling Springs is an absolute gem and a really huge community asset that we have. But if you look at the second question with 71 respondents, which is 62%, they mentioned disc golf and pickleball. Big Spring Park is also right up there with something they value as an asset. This is our youth that they want to see improved. Moving down to the second set of questions, you'll see that Rich knows this, Rick Wade knows this, anybody who's been to the community stadium, Kelly Carl knows this because her boys play baseball. We've got to have better restroom facilities at both our stadium and in our parks. And I know that we've got that restroom project on the docket, right, for this current budget year?
The Little League bathrooms? Yes. I've been told earlier today they will be completed this week.
Completed this week.
They've been they've been working on them this winter. They will complete their work with the final plumbing this week. They won't be open yet until we unwinterize them still. So it'll still be like normal mid-March before we actually open them up. But they are all newly renovated with new partitions, new plumbing, new automatic flush, everything. So similar to what was done at the fairground bathrooms, the same things were done down there, and a lot of roofing and other things were fixed. It was about a $45,000 renovation on just the bathroom facilities down at the Little League ball fields.
And that was budgeted as well.
That was a budgeted item through in this current budget cycle.
I know Rick is also, we're working on some plans to look at the bathrooms at Community Stadium, which are in dire need of some improvements. But if you move on down to the third question about the use of another athletic turf field, this has been a great need in our community, and not surprisingly, the youth with 75% said it was a great idea. I think you might be able to get 21% of the youth to say they don't care about pretty much everything.
I think so.
But it will really help us with scheduling, with in getting more use of our turf fields.
This winter is the perfect example. I mean, January, other than the week or week and a half of sub-zero temperatures, the rest of the year has been pretty mild, even though it may rain every other day, which keeps you off of the fields. Otherwise, if we had another turf field, kids could be out playing on the days like today when they can't because we just had rain yesterday. So this winter is a perfect example of what youth turf fields would get year round.
And then I think this is we needed to hear this. I think that the consensus with 81%, our youth said they wanted to see outdoor basketball courts at Falling Springs. Mm-hmm. That's helpful. We've talked about it a lot, but to hear where they want to play basketball is important.
Yes.
We were in the Final Four in Woodford County basketball just this past year. We're a basketball county, Coach. Yep. That's right. The improvements for parks and recreation services you'd like to see offered. Again, Big Spring Park improvements. More walking paths and trails. Equipment that is accessible. New outdoor playground equipment. You can go through there and see those yourselves, but the first thing that I would say is that's been one of my main points of emphasis is we want community input and involvement. I really appreciate the mayor going ahead and getting youth input and involvement, because that's who is going to be using these for the next generation. But it is additional public input and involvement that really helps us guide this, and I think it says that we're on the right track with these projects and what we're doing.
And we also have one that's out to the middle school, and we hope to have that back in the next week or so.
Well, I appreciate your work on that. So I'd like to return to the funding proposal. Again, this is the same funding proposal that we initially voted to support, that we voted to form into an order, and our commitment was there with that vote. It has changed, so this is like a new counter offer to the court. But I think that given the slight change in the financing model, which we wouldn't ask for sales to lose money to help us fund this. We're financially in good shape anyway. So I'd like to open up the floor for any comments from the committee on the funding model, the projects, any comments or questions that you might have. Squire Varner,
So,
you're recognized.
Judge, the bond money is gone, the 3%, so we have to provide all the funding to start off our project, correct? Not using the bond.
So that is correct. Now, the initial discussion was that the initial $600,000 would have been cash up front.
Yes.
So we would not have used any city funding for that.
Right,
It would have been the additional money after that.
right,
But that is the case.
right. Just questions, just thinking through, we got other projects that's coming up. I'd like to hear about the broadband. I'd like to see more about that too in this, because we have some big items that's going to be pretty expensive. And the parks, I totally agree with the parks project, but the broadband and still we haven't addressed what we might or might be able to not do with the water, South Woodford water. So just little concerns there, just kind of wanting to see where you were thinking and where the funding would be, and without seeing any numbers in front of me.
So let me address the funding for the All Points Broadband Project, and Lyles, you can jump in here if you want to add something. But number one, we have that money in cash on hand. That's our ARPA money that we have reserved. We budgeted for the 3.1 million roughly. That is sitting and waiting to be invested into infrastructure, and it has to be earmarked for that underneath the guidance of ARPA, which we committed it to. So that's not going to change. It could change in the way that if something happened with the project and it wasn't able to get off the ground, that we wouldn't be committed to spending it. But hopefully Philip Brown will be here soon to tell us about that. But as far as the financial, we don't need to bond it, number one. And then number two, we have the cash on hand. So.
Okay. On the broadband, and this might be a question for you and Lyles both, but the total project, we haven't got enough money to do the total project, correct? Secured?
No.
Well, that's
And what
I
was
get your
asking for,
question.
Lyles,
Yeah,
is for the piecemealing, the
Sure.
cherry picking,
Well-
we said we wouldn't do that.
you're exactly right. So I think what you're asking is what from the application that we put in for the state Better Internet Broadband program, or Better Internet program, we didn't receive the full request that we asked. I think that is, I'm going to give you an answer, and then I think we should have a further answer from Philip on this. What happened in that scenario, my understanding is, through the contested process of existing providers claiming to say where they served and where they didn't serve, not everybody that we applied for to serve would be then eligible to actually receive internet from All Points. So an existing provider, we know them, Windstream, Frankfurt Plant Board in a few places in the northern part of the county, Millville area, and maybe a couple other random, less prevalent, Time Warner, Spectrum Charter, I'm sorry, they're now Spectrum Charter. They all contested where they were proposals were. That money for the project was assuming that all of those areas would be served. So in the award, it actually was decreased based on a decreased eligibility. Not a ton, but there were some areas that were no longer eligible. I don't know how much that's going to impact the total cost for the project, because I don't know if they still have to go past those homes, those residences, to get to the other areas. And so that really doesn't decrease the total cost of the project, because they've got to lay fiber to go past a home that they previously were counting on going to as well. But it could be that the whole project goes down as a consequence of the removal of those homes. And so we may not need that additional money based on. Now, it's a whole conversation about whether or not folks are actually getting the service that the existing providers claimed, and we'll have to deal with that as we go forward. They'll need to contest that and some other things to try to make sure they get service. But it'll be a good question to ask Philip to confirm on, but we should be able to still move forward because of that reduction in people. And I'm going to get in trouble to give you an extra number because it changed several different times in the process because everybody is still either is growing their service or claims in the next 2 years they're going to grow their service, which is actually the really tricky, sticky point, is that some of them existing providers said, oh no, we are going to serve that area. We have plans to do it in the next 2 years. And so they were able to contest that. But it was a few hundred drops in those potential homes. So depending on where they are, that could be total savings, and we wouldn't need those funds.
Okay, I must have misunderstood the conversations, but I thought as we passed each home, they had the opportunity to run to that home. So if they wanted to take up that service.
No, that's also a good question. So what makes this all complicated, really more for the private side compared to us or to other folks, is these funds can only be used to serve unserved and underserved. So if these numbers have changed a little bit in the last 2 years, but assume an underserved are people who have broadband speeds of less than 100 megabytes per second download and 25 upload, and then unserved are 20 meg download and below that and 3 meg upload. So if somebody's above those speeds, then we can't use the federal funds to be able to serve those folks. So those would have to be a different phase of the project, if that makes sense. We may go past those homes and they could go back and use private dollars to do that later. But in this part of the project, we cannot serve those homes that were not identified as not underserved or unserved. And that's a good thing because we want to make sure that every dollar spent is going to the places where the market has failed them previously. But there won't be competition to these existing homes yet in the meantime.
And Squire Taylor, let me just try to distill that down to what I believe is the case. The project is smaller because Windstream, Spectrum, and others said that they were providing a better service than we thought people had. So those people still have internet, yes. And our position is it's subpar internet. Yes. It will not be as good as All Points broadband internet, but All Points broadband will then be in their service area, and they can probably end up hooking to it, which creates competition, which hopefully will expand, or call on the current providers to do better. But it's not going to cost us any more money in the project because we didn't get that additional level of grant funding. That grant funding was cut out because customers that were supposed to be serviced were cut out. If that makes sense.
I understand that. I was just, I know when we had
I think
talks a year ago in January when we voted on that when we started this project, we would hope, or we had made statements that we would be able to go right through. And I was just wondering if we have enough funding to do that project as we promised in January.
Right. Well, this is, so the RFP was all about the unserved and underserved. And that will meet all of those people. And there is kind of a, folks that are in in between, I won't say purgatory, but are in this in-between area that is unfortunate for, that maybe have 101 meg or download speed, which is still pretty fast internet. I mean, it's not nothing to scoff at, but it's not going to be at the level that these new folks will get that is a 1 gig symmetrical eligible. Now, you don't have to pay for that, but they'll have at a minimum, and now they're even saying that it might be 10 gig symmetrical by the time it's actually built, which would be just absolutely, lightning speed. But that's, but there are those folks that are kind of in that, they have better internet than their neighbors substantially right now, but it'll be lesser at that point. But again, those are easier to get to, so private dollars will get to them pretty quickly, I suspect.
I'm new at understanding all that lingo that's inside of broadband, but my personal experience with MetroNet, they started off telling me 100 was great, but when they told me you got so many drawn.
Devices.
Now, I'm upcharged to 400 and 500, so when we provide this service, I'd like for the folks to know that far out in the country, 100 may not be, so you're looking at X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
So,
And that will be part of the program, for sure. The understandable expectation of what a package will cost you. And Philip could talk about that a little bit more. So, Squire Varner, returning to the parks funding model, you mentioned Southwood for water. I mean,
yes, sir.
we still have general fund reserves. I'm not aware of any requests right now that they're making of us. I'm aware that they may have needs in the future, but they're being serviced by clean water monies, KIA funds, and then I think even a loan. And they've also raised their water rates, to my understanding. So I would like to see them not have a request for additional appropriations from the court. We can't ensure that, but as of right now, that's where I believe we are.
I wouldn't either, but with everything I hear from that project, that is a project that's got years down the road, and the only way that's going to be fixed is with money. So you can push forward and get those folks shored up on their water and make sure they got clean, safe water.
Yes.
So my concern is I'd like to make sure that we are approaching those folks and giving them all the help we can give them as we go through.
And I think that the fiscal court has done that to the tune of $300,000, and we've also secured additional clean water monies that they would have otherwise not been eligible for. Anything can happen. Water mains can bust. Costs and expenses can be incurred, but I believe as of January of this year, they were running in the good for the first time in a while. If that continues, I don't think they're going to be in a position to pay back the last $50,000 that we gave them, but I think that they might be in a position not to ask for any additional. That's where I stand on it today, and of course you all know that's subject to change. Other questions or comments regarding the parks funding model? Could we have a motion to recommend to the full fiscal court that we approve the order of the court for the jointly committing of funds to the city of Versailles for the Parks and Recreation Capital Improvements Project? Motion by Squire Carl.
Second.
Second by Squire Taylor. Any further discussion? Any other member of the court seeking to be recognized? Seeing none, all those in favor on the committee, please vote and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And the motion is granted. The order is recommended to the court. We'll move on to the Versailles Police salary increases. We have Chief Mike Murray with us. Chief Murray, thank you for joining us. I'll open up the floor for you to explain to the court what we have going on.
All right, Judge. Thank you, Judge. The same information I'm going to provide to the court here is the same information that I proposed to Mayor Troggett. Anyway, as everyone knows, officer retention has been very difficult for agencies statewide and nationwide. Many agencies in central Kentucky have given substantial pay increases across the board to their officers recently. And so I compiled a list of central Kentucky agencies, some a little bit outside of central Kentucky, to see where Versailles PD fell. Versailles PD was next to the bottom. What drew me here in 1995, for one thing, was the pay, the professionalism of the agency. Over the years, agencies caught up to us, and many have passed us. Two, we had a hiring process within the last year. We mailed out about 90 letters to applicants. 15 showed up. Out of that 15, I was very fortunate to be able to hire 3. We just had one recently graduate this past Thursday, and soon to have 2 more of the recruits who were untrained at that time to graduate in April. So I'm going to just name a few agencies and tell you where we are. Lexington Police Department in the last year gave all their officers an $8,000 bump across the board. Now some of their upper rank I think it's lieutenant and above, got a $4,000 bump. Richmond Police Department, if they hire someone who's trained, that we call laterals, if they have 3 or more years of experience, they receive a $15,000 sign-on bonus. Their lateral pay is much more than for sales at that time. Frankfort Police Department has an $8,300 sign-on bonus. Recently, Georgetown Police Department got several across-the-board raises. The first one they got was a $7,000 bump across the board. Fayette County Sheriff's Department recently got a $15,000 bump across the board for their deputies. UK Police Department recently gave a $20,000 bump across the board, and we recently lost 2 officers to UK. Governor Beshear gave state police a $15,000 bump across the board. We lost an officer to state police. If I lose any more officers, it's going to certainly affect our operations. So right now, some things that I have done since I've been chief to help retain officers is whenever we hire somebody, whether trained or untrained, I require them to sign a reimbursement contract. If you were untrained, it was 3 years, but under new legislation, that 3 years has been increased to 5 years now. On my lateral officers, those who are certified, it's a 2-year reimbursement contract. Now what that means is, it means, you know, it doesn't mean that they can't leave, but if they leave, whatever we've spent on them, they have to reimburse us. Some other incentives that I've done at the police department, if you all know, we recently did the Master Patrol program and the Advanced Police Officer program. Some of the requirements for those is under Master, you have to have 8 years of experience. 5 of those 8, you have to be employed or have been employed at Versailles Police Department. You also have to check some boxes on trainings. If you check those boxes and meet all the requirements, you can get a $3,000 stipend after July 15th. It's kind of added on to your pay like CLEF is. Under the Advanced Patrol program, you have to have 5 years of experience. 3 of those 5 have to be with Versailles Police Department, whether now or previously. That comes with a $2,000 bump, but 2, you still have to check the boxes to meet the training requirements. We've also got our health improvement policy. You know, after a police officer retires, life expectancy is 5 years. So we're trying to get our folks in a better level of fitness. So what we did is, if an officer participates and meets their goals, they can get up to 3 paid 12-hour days off. If you even participate but don't meet your goals, you can get 1 paid 12-hour day. Just try and do what we can to get people a little bit more motivated to get their level of fitness a little better. So what I did is I went to the mayor and I said, Mayor, we need to do something. I showed him all those agencies that got all those bumps. The timing couldn't be any better because on the retirement employer contribution rate, it's going down 5% for fiscal year 25. After running some numbers with our budget, at the end of January, we were 7.66% under budget, $469,000. So I told the mayor, I said, you know, if we could start at April 1st, that last quarter of the budget, that expense would be covered, would not need any budget amendment. And of course, we haven't done the first draft on our fiscal year 25 budget yet, but where we're tracking for the fiscal year 25 on our operating budget is keeping all line items static except for the salaries. That's where you'll see the increase in benefits. So the mayor felt like the timing was right, and that's where we are. So I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. And I really appreciate you coming to the court to explain this salary increase change in the mid-year of the budget.
One thing I'll add, Judge, that last quarter expense, once it becomes effective, is $142,000 and some change.
142 and some change.
One thing I would like to highlight.
Just give that to James.
Give me just a moment to find it here.
Take your time.
Everybody's turn. I'm just assuming we'll just slip that to him. He'll be all right.
I was appointed chief September 1 of 2018. Since that time, I have returned back to the county $457,000. That doesn't include fiscal year 23. I'm still waiting to hear back from auditors on that for the final number. So just wanted to mention that. And two, once this starts April 1st too, I feel like there's going to be money to return back to the county for the current budget that we're on.
Judge?
Yes, Mr. County Attorney, sir.
If I may say something, I've dealt with the local police for decades, and Chief Murray is correct. I remember that, given that there's a game tonight, this is somewhat analogous to UK basketball. It used to be the gold standard in terms of the salaries, and we would draw officers from all over this area, and some of our better ones stayed in that department, maybe went to the sheriff's department, but that has changed. We're losing them. I've talked to two recently who left to go to UKPD,
Right.
because the pay is so much better there. Didn't want to. They're local. They prefer to stay here. I think the goal always is to get good young officers you can get 20 years out of that'll want to pull their full time here. But it's hard to do now with the salary disparity.
It really is.
We've lost officers to Georgetown in addition to UKPD. That I know of for certain, but it's interesting how it's changed. Versailles City used to be the highest paying police department in this area.
It really was.
And the Mecca, and that's where officers wanted to come. And now, unfortunately, we're losing some.
Right. Now, Judge and the court, that salary increase does not include me, and it does not include my assistant chief, and it does not include our 4 part-timers. So.
This is for the regular patrol officer.
It is. Now, you know, we're right at 40 officers. 10 of us, you know, are retirees, me being one of them. The majority of us have more than 30 years. You know, we got some officers in their late 50s. You know, Brad Flynn, he's a part-time detective. He's mid-60s, you know. But two, the reason why they've stuck around and why I've stuck around too, it's a great place to be. You know, we don't have a lot of personnel matters as far as disciplinary issues or personnel matters. And one thing I always like to hit on, like I like to present at the Citizens Police Academy on history, we've only had one disciplinary hearing in the history of the department that goes back to 1870, and that was in 2006. I'd been assistant chief for 10 days, you know, so, but no, you know, the county, the city of Midway, you know, they've all been great supporters, and we just think, you know, me and the mayor both agree that the timing couldn't be any better,
And Chief, so I talked to the mayor when he was working through this decision, and you know, I told him that I was confident that the county and the fiscal court would support whatever needed to be done for the retention of officers. We've done that in county government, we've done that at the health department, we've done it at various other organizations, and we pride ourselves on the Versailles Police Department serving all of Woodford County. You know, and I really appreciate the sacrifice at the top that you're doing it for.
oh no, Judge, no, no, I'm fine.
But you're supporting those that are coming up through the ranks. And,
Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
appreciate that big time. One thing that I know that some fiscal court members and some other folks have said is that we want to make sure that the Versailles Police Department knows our contribution and feels our support, more importantly. When some of this information was coming back to me and some other magistrates, it was, well, the mayor's doing it. And, well, the mayor had a good idea, and it was supported by myself, and it was substantiated by you, Chief. But at the end of the day, the fiscal court and the city councils make these important budgetary decisions, and they prioritize the value of Versailles Police Department to our communities, individually and as a whole. And I hope our officers would know that our near 40% contribution to that amount is something that we want them to know that we were just talking about broadband and parks and all of our other expenditures that we have. And we want the Versailles police officers to know that the fiscal court has had their back, and we continue to do that.
Judge, very often, I always remind our officers where the funding comes from. I break it down, and the majority of those officers, you'd be shocked, but no, they watch all these Zoom meetings.
Yeah, good.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and we hope you'll share that with them.
I certainly will.
I'd like to open up the floor for any questions from the Budget and Finance Committee first, or any other member of the Fiscal Court. Squire Taylor?
Thank you, Judge. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your time. What are you seeing on these numbers are quite concerning, obviously, and the loss of folks. I'm particularly shocked, and I had heard from one of your officers previously about the UK department folks making that jump. But that's particularly shocking to me because it's a different retirement.
They're non-hazardous.
Yeah.
It's 27 years. Now, I don't know what they start at. I
Sure.
don't know what their laterals are, start out at, but I do know that if you have any officer that has college, whatever years they have, they give those as years as experience. And, the only thing I know is that the two that left were going to benefit from it, so that's
Sure.
why they left.
And it's hard. I mean, it's hard to compete with the market, in that sense, unless we have these flexibility to make that adjustment. What are you seeing, I guess, on the retention side of it? There's nothing we can do, Judge, about this on it's a state decision on retention for retirement system. But I hear more and more stories about the change.
Of course, let me just share what's been shared with me from all the officers that have now gotten it that will become April 1st. Let me tell you what, it's the greatest thing, because I told the mayor, I said, look, Mayor, whatever dollar amount we come up with, when you look at your check, you need to see the difference, because a lot of times you get these bumps, and by the time taxes and everything comes out, you don't see much. So, we looked, we saw what Lexington did, we saw what Fayette County SO did, saw what Lexington did, what Georgetown did. I know Nicholsville is right in the mix of trying to get something approved. I don't know if they will or not, because they have contacted me, trying to see what we're doing, how we keep people, a lot of agencies out there have started doing what we're doing, a little bit. But, it's just a constant game of trying to see what we can do for the officers. Back when I started in '89, I was just thankful to be employed, You looked sharp, you had great equipment, but didn't get overtime, didn't even get paid through your dinner breaks, So my time card was 37 and a half hours a week, so.
My point on that is, and I know the General Assembly is potentially looking at a change at least for hazardous. It would be a huge difference, because we have, at least one of the officers I know, and that change. I know them well and know their age and know they had some years in, and there used to be a big advantage for us to retain folks, that it was a disincentive for them to go in a new retirement system when you talk about getting to that the new year served. But with the more officers we see with this hybrid or less defined benefit system, the less of an incentive it is for them to stick around and just chase the dollar. And it's,
A lot of them do chase that dollar.
and I don't blame them. I'm not faulting anybody on that, but I hate to see that we lost. It used to be harder for somebody to financially make that change to go to Lexington because they're a different retirement system, or to UK because they're a different retirement system. But now we're also competing with them in a whole different level.
Now, if you remember, we were on 8-hour shifts for years. 2 years ago, we went to 12s, and 12 hours is a long day. But you get 8 hours of built-in overtime for every check. They get 26 paychecks. It's a total number of 208 hours of overtime through the year, automatically. You're off every other weekend, so you get Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. You work 78 fewer days on the year, because that's all I kept hearing from the younger folks is I need more time off. They work about on average about 14 days a month, so. Now, see, when I started, I was rotating shifts every 3 months. A lot of things have changed, They have.
And Chief, this is our Budget and Finance Committee, and we'll welcome you back to talk about the future budget.
Absolutely.
But what is your anticipation that this will have on our next year's fiscal year budget?
I can give you that, Judge, based off current numbers. The salary increase would be roughly $377,000. The benefits part of that would be $194,000, with a total of $571,000. Now, Midway's share is going up fiscal year 25 from 4.25 to 5.5%. So their share on that's $31,421. But you're looking at approximately, just based off current numbers, it'd be an extra $51,000 and some change per quarter. $205,149.
Thank you, Chief. Other questions or comments regarding the Versailles Police salary increases? Squire Varner, you recognized.
Chief, I just wanted to thank you for your time on Saturday. I know you had family
no,
time.
you're very welcome,
You answered
Darryl.
the phone and answered my questions, and we had a good discussion. Thank
I
you very
want
much for
everybody
that
to
time.
know, if you need me, you call me anytime.
But thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Mr. County Attorney?
Judge, one last thing, Chief, I don't know whose idea it was, but I very much enjoy coming up to the stop signs in the city now and being told it's my choice. Complete stop is free, a rolling stop is 163. I actually think that's an attention grabber and hopefully effective. Again, I don't know.
Well, I don't want to steal the mayor's thunder, but it was his idea.
But that was an excellent idea, and I'm always reminded being in this courtroom when Judge Blackard, I'm told, was the presiding judge in traffic court, and there was a stop sign violation. He would tell the offenders, when you get to that stop sign, you got to feel that car rock back. So that's, and your signs are a different way of explaining that, or the mayor's. So I think that's an excellent approach to it.
Okay, good deal.
Well, if the mayor can get those signs up, we can get these downtown parking signs up pretty quick. Thank you, Chief. Anybody else have anything additional for the Chief? I appreciate at the first request that you were here, so
Oh, no.
thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Judge.
Thank you. So we will not take up the indigent funding request. We have some additional things to work through on that request. The county attorney. I was saying we will not take up the indigent funding request. County attorney, myself, the court clerk, and the coroner we're discussing that, but we will probably return that to you maybe at our next meeting. Let's see. We still don't have Mr. Brown here. I think he might have been slated to come at our fiscal court meeting, which is fine. But I'll move on to the Annex HVAC RFP. Y'all have had the time to review that latest document. And I will say on that RFP, Rick and I met with the AOC yesterday, and we have a few edits and things that can improve that and meet their requirements. It's a facility that the AOC uses primarily. We don't have any county agencies in the annex. So what we need to do is, I'd like to open up it for any, does anybody have any questions about the RFP? Is there a motion for the Budget and Finance Committee to recommend that approval to the full fiscal court? Motion by Squire Carl. Second by Squire Taylor. Is there any discussion?
I would just assume with those adjustments that
Yes,
you mentioned.
so it will be based on the final approval, edits by the judge executive and final approval of the county attorney is the motion we'll make in full court. But thereon, you'll make that motion, Squire Taylor.
Yeah.
And is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. The next item is the Woodford Foundation appropriation. And I don't know if my email on that of last week was entirely clear, but let me make it very clear. The Woodford Foundation is a joint city and county 501c3, mainly developed by the city of Versailles. Former school board chair Danny Bradley is the chair of that organization. She's appointed by the mayor. Tim Middleton is the treasurer, and our own Drew Chandler serves in the capacity, I believe, as secretary, is that right, of the organization. During the last cold snap, when both the city and the county, working through Ellie Castle as the victim's advocate at the police station, working with Spark Community Cafe and some other community organizations, we were locating people that had housing insecurity or shelter needs during that cold snap. And the decision was made, instead of opening up our warming centers, to put folks in alternative shelter like a hotel room, a motel room. There were folks that offered up Airbnbs, rooms in their home, open rooms in apartments, things like that. So we worked through that, and specifically for the hotel rooms that we paid for, the Jerry Hartley Foundation provided private funding for that, and the Woodford Foundation, through the City of Versailles' appropriation, provided public funding for that. In my email, you will see that the City of Versailles also has done things like take care of utilities and some other expenses for those in need. My request of the fiscal court is for an appropriation of $5,000 to the Woodford Foundation in order, in the times of cold or even, I guess, in some sort of extreme weather emergencies, that we have the ability to help meet temporary emergency housing or sheltering needs, like putting people up in a hotel room if needed. And so Director Chandler is on the Woodford Foundation, and he also wears two hats, obviously, as the Emergency Management Director, who is also working on those issues during the cold snap. But Director Chandler, you just want to give a little background on the foundation?
Judge, as you said, the Woodford County Foundation is a legitimate 501c3 organization. We received notification of that back in the summer. It was made retroactive pretty close to the original date of incorporation. Going that route affords us opportunities to pursue funding sources from a variety of organizations, some of which may be able to have some tax advantages for their contributions. I think originally the vision of the foundation was to help bridge the gap in some of the community and faith-based organizations, particularly those around the students in the school system, with the high percentage of need there. So far, the foundation's been able to be really nimble and respond to unique circumstances. And instead of spending money in some cases, it's just connecting folks with the correct resource for what their needs are, and looking at long-term solutions, not short-term fixes. As you stated, Judge, the foundation was able to assist a few families during the January extremely cold weather. And there was one circumstance with a lady and a young child. They didn't need to be in a congregate housing environment. They needed a private space. There was another individual that was living in austere circumstances in the southern end of the county that one of Sheriff Wilhoit deputies was able to convince that for their own safety, they needed to leave that circumstance, and they were able to sleep in a warm hotel room. The donation would be very helpful to the foundation because decisions can be made very rapidly, a lot of times much more efficiently than city or county government. And as a nonprofit, it has a little more latitude. That being said, we are in the process of implementing QuickBooks so we can be fiscally transparent to make sure that the donors are able to see where their money is going at a moment's notice through the financial reporting.
Thank you, Director Chandler. And of course, we would have an appropriation as separate from a donation, but by virtue of this order, it would not go into funds that could be spent without our understanding of how they were being spent. Now, we may not be able to get in the details, although at the level that we were working on it during the cold snap, I mean, I knew where the people were going, I knew how much a night was, I knew how many nights they were staying, all that sort of stuff. I mean, but that is my expectation, that should anything like that come to us again, that we would have the nimbleness and ability to work with the Woodford Foundation and to hold up our end of the collective bargain to take care of folks in dire need and emergency circumstances.
Judge, I would want to add that the foundation is not just Mr. Middleton, Ms. Bradley, and myself. There are a number of community stakeholders ranging from the health department to the victims advocate at the police department, several of the school resource officers and guidance counselors. It is a great cross-section of the organizations that are offering assistance throughout the community.
Thank you for that clarification. So I'd like to open up the floor. We do not have this item budgeted. However, we do have $1,000 budgeted in indigent care and relief in that line item. So this would be an additional appropriation above and beyond that. We didn't anticipate this type of appropriation, but I think it is very much needed. So I'd open up the floor for any discussions or questions regarding the appropriation request. Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to recommend the order be approved by the full fiscal court at our meeting. Motion by Squire Varner. Second by Squire Taylor. Any other members of the court seeking any additional discussion? I'd like to move on to the budget process to set forth what we're going to be doing and working through our budget this year. The first thing that I would say is we've essentially already had our first budget meeting. The maintenance and facilities project list was the very first budget meeting, happening slightly earlier than we have at any point in the past 5 years. I think that's good to go ahead and get that stuff rolling. I'd also add that that project list is an ongoing project list that is really week to week. Things can change. But we'll continue to look at that through our maintenance and facilities committee, Chair Downey and Rick Wade. But that was essentially our first look at some of the items that would be included in the budget. The next thing is to really kind of give you all on that diligently, some farther along than others. But my goal is to try to provide those like we did last time, meaning that we won't have a vetting session, that you'll get to see what their first drafts look like, with the recognition that first drafts can change and will change very likely throughout the budget process. Leadership meeting yesterday, Jailer Michelle Rankin said that they were already hard at work on their budget. They're at a big disadvantage on that April 1st deadline because they can't know what the county's going to do for salary increases, and they can't know health insurance increases. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. The entire budget proposal will be submitted to the fiscal court by May 1st. That's standard. That's what we do every year. You all know that we have to advertise our LGEA and our CRA proposed fundings and have public hearings. But in June, likely, the fiscal court will meet to consider the proposed budget, but that will not be without pre-budget workshops, is what the old court used to call them. We just call them budget and finance committee meetings. They're a little bit less formal than a standard meeting, but we go through all of our budget line items and see what all the changes are from year to year. Then we need to have our first reading. I have not scheduled the first reading, but it is very likely going to be the first meeting in June. Sometimes with the advertising requirements, we might move that back to the second meeting in May, or even call a special meeting. But one of the things that we did last year that I would continue to do in this budgeting process is put that first reading as far back as we possibly can, so that we can include any additions before the second reading and have no changes, no substantive changes before the second reading. The county judge makes the changes to the proposed budget as directed by the fiscal court. That really, to be honest, in our process, the fiscal court is included from the very beginning discussions. And I want you all to know that, because that doesn't always feel like how it's presented. Our budget and finance committees are your opportunities to work on areas of the budget, to bring things up that are important to you all. Some judges simply trot the budget out and say, here it is, take it or leave it. I have never done that. I won't do that. It's a collaborative process, and really the hard work is done on the budget by the departments for the most part. After our first reading, of course, you all know we submit it to the Department of Local Government for their approval, and that approval can take time because they're approving 120 county budgets in addition to all their other requirements. We have to advertise and publish our readings. We have to post copies. We do that all online. All of our budget documents end up going online. That's not the case in all counties, but that's one of the items of transparency that we've always used on our budget. Second reading and adoption of the proposed budget must be done by July 1st, and July 1st is obviously the beginning of the new fiscal year. So that's the general budget timetable. I've laid that out every year. Again, we're kind of starting a little bit earlier this year, but I think that's a good thing to go through all of our iterations. You all have for you the mandated appropriations. You have the elected officials' salaries, the judge executive salary, the jailer, and those must be set by May 1st. My statutory salary is set in law regardless, so if you feel the need to increase my pay for any reason, just please don't. I'm good. The sheriff and the county clerk, we take up their budgets mid-year. One of the things that we have done in the last couple years that is a big change is we've moved all of their salary increases to July 1st. We moved the sheriff and the county clerk's budget up with us, which increased the sheriff and county clerk deputies half of a year earlier, which really helped bring up some of their salaries. So we're talking about giving increases to law enforcement. Those were essential increases to our county clerks, deputies, and sheriff's deputies by that move. We also moved the county clerks to a 40-hour work week, which adds additional pay for them. And of course, they've also been included in our county raises each and every time. The magistrates' salaries, as the county attorney always sets out, must be the same, although the court can consider a cost of living adjustment. We must also set the coroner's salary. Unlike other constitutionally elected offices, which the state sets the statutory salary for that office, we, as the Woodford County Fiscal Court, set the coroner's salary. in the last budget, the coroner actually took a pay cut in order to give a deputy coroner additional pay. And the coroner, as did the new magistrates, received the cost of living adjustment at the beginning of this year, as scheduled under our 1-year rule. We do not pay constables, as you know, but we do have statutorily mandated appointments for the road supervisor and the county treasurer. My conversation with the county treasurer is that she was on an interim basis, an acting basis, and that when we adopted her as the county treasurer, that I would look to increase her pay as part of this budget. That will be a salary adjustment that the personnel committee, the human resources manager, and myself will submit to the court. The road supervisor, we did a statutory increase just a year back, but we would look at any other additional raises for the road supervisor. We have to do our bonds for elected and appointed officials, our unemployment insurance, our workers' compensation insurance. Those all look fairly good. Workers' comp could go up for us. We did have some claims in the past year. We have the mandatory match for county employees for Social Security at 7.65%, which is required by statute. Retirement in the county employee retirement system, those numbers have been looking a lot better for the county, which helps us give those raises, but that is 23.34% for non-hazardous duty and 43.69% for hazardous duty. Again, that's mandated by statute by the General Assembly. We also set the county attorney's salary and also the deputy coroners and the deputy county attorneys, the assistant county attorney salaries.
By the first Monday in May.
By the first Monday in May. And we will do what we traditionally do in that, which is set that as what will be set in the budget for across the board for county employees. We pay the ex officio law librarian for the circuit clerk's office, which is Liz Woods. We include that as part of our mandated appropriations. We pay 12.5% per capita for public defenders. We have, by law, mandated appropriations for costs associated with indigent burials. And I think we'll probably take up some of that issue at our next fiscal court meeting. One thing that I will say is that in the discussion around indigent burials, there are some questions about the program, questions that can be clarified by virtue of maybe modifying our program. And then I think there are some questions that are policy questions. What do we want to do? What are we required to do, and what do we desire to do? But we're not going to get in that today, but we may get into that in a committee meeting down the road. You all know that we are mandated, and I think is one of our best and greatest responsibilities is to budget and for the expenses of our election. Of course, we have the general election, the presidential election in the fall, which will be part of this next budget and will be a big budget expense. One of the things that we've continued to do with the elections budget is make sure that we are communicating with the community about how to vote, what changes there have been in voting laws, and where people can vote. And as you know, we have in the past election 4 voting centers where anybody can vote. We no longer have the old precinct elections. In some ways that has saved us some money. In other ways, we really should bear the expense of educating the public on how those changes have happened. Of course, we've already budgeted for the primary this spring. You all are aware of our LGEA money, the coal severance funds, which are dwindling, but we use a lot for our road department. And then we have a PBA statutory contribution, which has been in the ballpark of $108,000 that we annually prepare for. The one good thing that I can say is that county revenues continue to exceed forecasts. There are more jobs in Woodford County today than there have been in the past, and there are better pay. There's better wages being paid in Woodford County than in the past. And jobs and wages look to continue to grow. So our occupational tax revenue is exceeding our forecast expectations. You all know that we lowered property tax, but we also have seen increases in the value in property valuation. And so while we've lowered that tax, it doesn't necessarily mean that our revenues are that much lower than where the tax is. But overall, our revenues are good. You all look at the financial report for this week, and it's the highest it's been ever at this point in the budget. And that returns me back to the budget discussion of last time about how we spend and what we spend. And I want you all to know that our procurement processes are sound, our departments are educated, and they spend money wisely. We have a strict and routine way of spending money in our budget so that we don't overspend. But there was some suggestion that we maybe spend money in a way that is not necessarily responsible. We are mid-year, we are over mid-year, we're in February, and our budget is well ahead of where it was. And it's and our current bank balance is at a historic rate. We have been conservative. We have not been reckless in our spending. The 6.5% cost of living adjustments that we granted to our employees was not only earned, but it was well deserved. And we need to continue to look at doing more like that. We saw what the Versailles police chief explained in law enforcement, that you have that similar situation with paramedics and EMTs. So we're looking at what needs to be done along those lines. So prepare yourself for the discussion for salary increases for some folks. The current cost of living this year is 3.1%, I believe. I would like to look, I've never done this before. I've never said at the beginning of the budget process what we will do. In fact, I've held that out to the very beginning after I've reviewed all of the expenses of county government, particularly health insurance. I would like to do that. I would like to look and explore at 3%, but that is not a guarantee. I can't promise that that our budget can sustain that. We have to look at that. We're going to have additional expenses. The county contribution on the police contract, Squire Brown, will increase by the move that was explained by the police chief. In 2019, Woodford County's contribution to the police contract was $1.1 million. This year it's $2.1 million. That will go up again this next year. We had an unbudgeted expense of police radios last year. We also included some other extra budget expenses in relation to the police contract. So those are other things that will factor in. A couple of things that I want to put on your radar as things that I'm looking at very likely including in the budget is number one, the mayors and myself have worked with the food pantry for a proposal to jointly share the cost of a food pantry director for our community. Sharon Harden has worked extremely hard as a volunteer, working 7 days a week, 60 plus hours a week, and she does it all for free, all pro bono, and donates her time. That is not a sustainable model. With the decline in volunteerism, and particularly somebody with that amount of dedication and passion and free time, in order to make sure our food pantry remains vibrant. You know, the county owns that land. That is a building that is specified for a food pantry, and we will want to see it continue that way, and I will propose that in my budget. And the mayors are also on board on that and going to propose that in their budget. We still need to enter into our MOU with the city about the Woodford County's Farmers Market Pavilion for downtown, the $75,000 a year. I fully anticipate that will be in the budget for the next year, with a commitment to do it for all the years of this court's term, and an option to renew thereafter. I believe that the farmers market downtown Versailles is critical to keep our link between our farming community and our city, and it is not only a sign and symbol of our farming community, it is a true market that will be held downtown. Now, I want to say this as well. I think Woodford County is a farming community in a way that doesn't have to have one farmer's market. It doesn't have to only be downtown. In fact, we don't. It happens in Midway. It happens on the east side of Versailles. I would love to see more than one farmer's market happen, but I do believe that their home needs to be in the heart of the county seat in downtown Versailles, and that's why I believe that the county should contribute $75,000 per year, at least for the first 3 years and the full amount of our term. We've dispensed with this year the Jaws of Life appropriation, and so that probably will not be in our budget next year. I do look to increase the services of Bluegrass Community Action. Their level of contribution from the county has remained the same, but I believe that there is a need in our community that needs to continually be addressed. They're the best agency to do that, so I do look towards additional an increase in contribution to Bluegrass Community Action. Our CASA donation of $20,000 is a godsend to the young children who are facing abuse and neglect in our community, and CASA is helping them through the system. That was one of the best decisions of the prior court, and I look to continue to fund that in this court. Those are just some of the things. Jackie, you had a question?
Yes, could you give the figures again, what we spent this last year more of everything with the police and what we're gonna spend this next time?
The current now, the chief mentioned this.
Okay.
They return funds to the fiscal court.
Yes.
So what we budget is not always what we expend. In fact, it has been lower each year. But it's estimated that we would spend $2.1 million this year.
Okay.
And next year, at least from what we saw today, that could increase by $500,000.
Okay. Can I ask you another question?
Yes, sir.
With giving them the raises, what about the sheriff's department? Cause I know people that worked on the sheriff's department in Lexington, and they all try to get jobs with the schools. One last year, well, anyway, none of them got it. It was 5 or 6 of them. So they applied again because it's some works that they wasn't right. Department. Tell me if I'm wrong, they serve the papers for the city and county, right?
That's right. They do a lot more than that.
And they do some other work too to help
Yes.
them. So are we looking at an increase of that too? Because other cities has already had that cost for the sheriff's department.
So I would say, Squire Brown, that would be the most appropriate question for our sheriff, Johnny Wilhoit. But in the budget that we just passed for them, that was not anticipated. In fact, it would be anticipated that their raises and increases would be commensurate with the rest of our county employees.
Well, we wouldn't anticipate on this with the city of Versailles, but we got it. Right? We're asking for this quarter. Did I misunderstand or not?
I'm sorry. Ask me
We're asking
again.
for more money now.
Yes.
Okay, so what will keep the sheriff's department asked it too if we give it to them now?
I don't think anything will keep it from that happening.
So it can happen.
Well, I mean, we don't.
Start losing people like they're saying the reason why we need to do it now.
The Woodford County Fiscal Court, to my knowledge, and Mr. County Attorney, and you know as well, Squire Brown, we have never, in my knowledge, in the history of this body, given salary increases across the board for any department or agency in the fourth quarter of a budget year. Can you confirm that?
We're doing it now, right?
No, we are not.
They are.
Yes, that's correct.
So, but it don't cost us nothing now? It just will next year? Correct.
That's correct. That's correct. And we've got Philip Brown from All Points Broadband here, and Philip, thank you for being with us. We've got you slated for an update. If this extends over a little bit, we could have it go into the fiscal court meeting at 5:30. We actually started to have a little bit of conversation. We were discussing some other budget matters, so if anybody's referencing what we talked about in the past, make sure to include Mr. Brown so that he's caught up. But I'd welcome you to the podium just to kind of give the Budget and Finance Committee an overview of what we've got going on.
Sure. Should I?
Yeah, if you don't mind to turn on the mic there.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. Gotcha. Good evening, everyone. Philip Brown with All Points Broadband. I guess briefly, I've been at All Points just about 5 months, a little bit short of that. Joined them in late September from another telecommunications company called Crown Castle, which primarily owns and operates cell tower infrastructure. So it's the wireless side of what we do, but was brought in part to beef up our presence in the state as we launch this project in Woodford, as well as a couple of other counties here in Kentucky, and look to the future for All Points as we grow our footprint. So All Points Courts is excited about our partnership with you, and we know that you're anxious for us to get going in earnest. As you'll recall, the total project budget is in excess of $16 million, with contributions from both Woodford County, the state, and All Points Broadband. We're going to be connecting about 1,800, a little bit more than 1,800 locations here in Woodford, all across the county, from north to south, east to west, not so much in Versailles proper, but in the rest of the parts of the county that don't have adequate service today. And just very quickly, where we are. We've begun some outreach to the local utility pole owners that we'll be attaching fiber to. We're getting that process started. Very thankful to the Commonwealth in the last couple of years. It has streamlined the process for companies like All Points to get access to utility poles. That is a significant challenge in terms of project schedule and construction timelines. That process called Make Ready Engineering and Construction. So anything that state government or the RPSC can do to make that quicker is a good thing. And so we're going to have an easier road than perhaps earlier broadband projects have confronted. On the other point, or the other step that's key, we received from the Commonwealth Office of Broadband Deployment a contract for this project on January 29th, so just about 2 weeks ago, and that contract is under review by All Points internal legal counsel, and we're looking at, as with any construction project, the contract matters, and so we do need to be deliberate in reviewing the state's proposed contract to ensure that it says everything it needs to say. The details in a contract do matter, and at the same time, we want to get that done as quickly as possible so that we can really start our activity. We can't really do much until we have a contract in place, and so that's sort of the long pole in the tent for me today on this project is helping All Points and the folks I work with to advance that conversation with the Commonwealth on the contracts language so that we can get it to execution. And I do have I had a deck, but a key point. Again, my name is Philip Brown. Any of you at any time should feel free to ask me any questions you have. My email address is pbrown@allpointsbroadband.com. I've got business cards. My cell phone number is on that, and so I want to make sure that all the magistrates know. Please ring me, email me when you have specific questions. I'm your prime point of contact for anything.
And Philip, Squire Varner had a question earlier, basically about once our grant allotment was announced. It was less than we were going for.
Right.
And his question basically, and Squire Varner, you can ask it if I don't ask it correctly, is does that make our county contribution more? Do we have to pay more because of the lack of those grant funds. Is that right?
I would like to, go ahead.
And also, the scope of the project, what we're looking at, the total number that we're looking at for the project. And also in that question, when we first discussed this early in January, that when we passed a home, that we were going back to the home regardless if they had internet or not. So that was you're right, Judge. Thank you.
We can clarify that.
Yeah, and I want to, let me go back and nail that down, but in reviewing prior materials, I think that the overall budget for the project, as well as All Points contribution, what we were looking for from the state, and what the county was putting up, were all higher than what were announced in the fall. So I think that all those dollar amounts came down when those number of locations came down, and so I don't think that your per location expense has gone up. But let me nail that down, and I will circle back to you and the rest of the fiscal court and the judge.
And then, Squire Varner, you want to continue asking questions that you have?
My concern was just going into a budget sequence. I know you're in the first stages, but I would like to see some numbers pretty close to what this project's going to cost. Because when we start this budget process, we have made that commitment in January to start this project, and we also made the commitment that we wouldn't cherry pick, that we would do this project from beginning to end.
Right.
So I just want to know we got enough money secured to do the project, and if not, then as we fight this budget, we're going to have to put money together for that or look at other sources.
I think you mean work on the budget?
Okay.
And
put it together way
Point taken, and we can let me schedule some dedicated time with you, and we'll make sure that that's taken care of.
Excellent. Other questions or comments for Phil?
Can I clarify?
Squire Taylor.
I just want to ask this, and this is this goes back to obviously you don't have a complete project agreement with the state yet, but my understanding from the grant application and our work from the RFP is that there is a requirement, and I just want to put Squire Varner's concerns at ease, and you may not be willing to say this explicitly just yet, but my understanding would be that there is a guarantee, to the best that we can accomplish based on the information and data we have, that everyone who is labeled as unserved and underserved will be served in this project. That is a critical element that is a part of that grant contract, as well as our RFP going forward. That what has been tricky has been whittling down is who is actually underserved and who is actually unserved explicitly, and that's what's made all of these numbers fungible a little bit, is because those numbers have been they've been a moving target because of some growth in existing providers, as well as commitments by existing providers to serve areas that aren't currently being served. That was it 2 years that they said they would. So I'm sorry, I just wanted you to be able to speak to that.
That's exactly correct. And All Points business model, our approach to these situations is to provide service to all of the locations that we can. And when we put together a grant application, of course, any other provider has the opportunity to say, wait, we provide service to that location. And so that's an iterative process. It has to take into account different grant programs through different agencies, including at the federal level, NTIA, the USDA, different programs within, the FCC. And so as we work through those different awards, you do have to look at okay, that location is slotted to get money from the RDOF program versus the RUS program, and at the end of the day, you arrive at a number that is your best estimation of everyone that's unserved and underserved. And I would say as well, these 1850 locations that we're looking at for this project, for All Points, don't represent the end of our presence in Woodford County. It's more of a start for us. And so, we would seek to grow our presence and ability to provide an option for as many places as possible, not just the 1,850 locations in this project's scope.
Thank you, Squire Varner. So if nobody has anything, yeah, go ahead. Squire Gill was first.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. While you're looking at this, can you look and see what kind of recourse people have? This is a huge drop. It was originally estimated there would be 3,077 homes. That was a year ago that would be